Hi everyone, welcome. I'm down here in my wormery, preparing to check in on a couple of my European nightcrawler worm bins. What I've got for them today is an assortment of different stuff out of my freezer. I don't think it's been in my freezer very long. This might be the stuff that my mom provided me yesterday. And there's also a couple days worth of coffee. So this stuff consists mostly of fruit. I think there might be some veggie matter in here too. So we'll get a closer look at it once we start feeding these little guys. So, 76-day-old systems, fed 6 times so far, and the last check-in being 14 days ago and being kind of small. I think we gave them some coffee, they split a hard roll that I soaked in water, maybe a little something else. There might have been something else, but it wasn't much, so I think they're probably due for a feeding. We're going to get them up on the bench, get them fed, so let's get to work. So here in front of the camera you could see bins number 1 and bin number 2, in which we had at one point a few check-ins ago put out top coverings of newspaper, which I usually apply as a single layer of paper, but in this case these were folded over 2-layer pieces of paper, which have surprisingly resulted in them being quite durable and holding up. Although I did watch the video from last time and it did seem like, even though there's large solid patches in bin number 2, I think there was just a tiny little bit of paper that was still holding this together as a single continuous piece of paper, and it no longer does that. So we already speculated a little bit that during the last check-in that perhaps these top coverings would get retired and replaced. It's funny, like one of them is even stuck to our feeding zone indicator. I'll tell you, I mean, feeding zone indicator is still holding up, and top covering paper is holding up good enough as far as I'm concerned. We could just keep them. I didn't prep here with any sort of replacement top coverings. I did sort of anticipate that they would still be okay and usable. But you'll remember from what I showed you a moment ago, the coffee that I'm giving them includes a couple new coffee filters. So I believe what we're going to do with the old coffee filters that were serving the function of feeding zone indicator, showing ourselves where we last fed, I believe we'll actually reuse those in the feeding area. Just off camera, besides the foods that I've got for them, I've got my prepared bedding. I've also got my leaves, my little collection of leaves. You can see I've actually been using some of them out here as sort of a top dressing. That doesn't look like it was from last time. That might go back a ways. Can't tell. I don't remember. I did watch the video, but certain details of the last check-in do escape me, so I don't remember if we applied a leafy top covering, but I did think that it would be nice to give them some. The last check-in was fun because, even though we gave them somewhat boring food, we walked in on them enjoying some stuff that they were really liking. So this right here is pretty interesting. But let's probe through here to see if we could find the other one. There was 2 of those, and those are chestnuts. And in the case of that one, that's the whole chestnut we gave them. There would have also been one that was cut in half, because I had 3, so each system got a whole chestnut and a half of a chestnut. Last time it was kind of cool because the half chestnut was completely filled with worms working down that chestnut in there. However, this thing was still hardly touched. And it's going to be tough to see on the camera, but what I'm finding pretty amazing is that they've gone in there through that tiny little hole, which I'm kind of prying open right now. So the hole was really kind of like this. A little slit, 2 slits crossing. They went in there and they completely cleared out this shell of the chestnut. So that's so cool. So there is another half of one of those floating around, and that one they just cleaned out because I guess it was just really easy to get into it. And in the case of that one, well, they must have gotten a taste for the chestnut from eating the easy access one, and then they decided, well, we're going to go for it and nibble away the more difficult access one. So here's the other chestnut. I believe that last time it was probably pretty close to being emptied. I thought it was just castings that they left behind. Some bedding fell in, but there was a couple wormies in there. seemingly still working what remains in there, which is kind of surprising. In here I don't see anybody, but it is dark. I could just be missing them. And you know what else was kind of cool? There was a half of an orange. I believe it was probably placed in here at the same time as the chestnut had been placed in here. And that thing was super popular last time too, but I didn't see anything that resembled that, so maybe that was completely consumed. Not too surprising. Oh, well, you know what? Is that what we're seeing here? No, yes it is. And it doesn't smell bad, it just smells like orange. So I just wanted to clarify, because it felt like I had made sort of a noise there, a reaction noise that might have suggested that it was not too nice, but it's okay. Kind of surprising, it's holding up pretty good there. If it's holding up there, it would suggest to me that there's probably still remnants of it in bin number 1. We just didn't happen upon it. And we're not going to go out of our way looking for it either. We're just going to press on. If we bump into stuff, we'll check them out. Here's the jalapeno. This system had a jalapeno too, but that one was red. That one was not. So here's the half chestnut. And you know, I was hasty in doing that. I should have checked out how many worms were in it. I just sort of shook its contents free. And there might have been a couple wormies hanging out. Sometimes it makes me wonder, you know, are they in there for the food, or is there just something about the ability to creep into some sort of little tiny space and occupy it and call it your home, like a little shell almost, or a little hidey hole, hiding spot? I don't know, but the worms do somehow, or I guess I find them gravitating towards kind of small enclosed spaces, and they huddle in there together. So I don't know why I'm doing exactly the opposite of what I said earlier. I am kind of on a wild goose chase, thinking it would be nice to see if I could find that other whole chestnut, because we found the half one, but where the whole one is, I don't know. You know, I wouldn't be surprised if it turned up when we backfill the feeding zone. So why don't we just proceed? We're not going to dawdle here any longer. We're going to proceed with giving these little guys a nice little assortment of my prepared bedding. And since we're going to give them a nice top coating of leaves too at the end, I feel like I don't need to be too generous, right? And don't forget, we're going to be recycling these now. These are no longer feeding zone indicators, although they could have held up quite nicely for another feeding at least. We're sort of promoting them to a more noble function of bedding to accompany the feeding. So let's dig in. Some of this stuff was frozen so solid I needed to chip it apart with a sharp knife, and it had a berry smell to it. I could easily recognize cantaloupe, banana, apple peels, onion. The onion is my contribution, actually. Everything else came from my mom's. And there might have been some potato peel in here too. It's hard to say. Once the stuff starts to thaw, it does emit a little bit more of its scent, makes it easier to recognize. When you got a mishmash of stuff like this together, you know, you're certainly going to smell the cantaloupe that has a nice scent to it. Other things that are in here also seem to have a somewhat more dominant scent than others. So the things that I'm thinking about, what was it, that berry smell or whatever it was just hard to recognize or hard to identify. Wasn't quite sure what that was. So, new feeding zone indicators. Now we'll just use some material. Well, you know what? I almost forgot. A lot of times I'll add grit to my worm bin feedings. And since I've got plenty of that on hand, I'm going to be generous. And I've also got my worm chow. And there too, I've got my little thing going here. Whenever I put coffee in a system, I like to also combine it with a little bit of worm chow, hopefully making it interesting for the wormies to dig in. And you know, something, I don't know why, but I've got this fascination with dampening stuff that appears to be going into the bin dry lately. Something I never really paid a whole lot of attention to, but somehow I want to stay ahead of the curve. You know, a lot of times I feel like I'm reacting to worm bins getting a little bit overly dry instead of getting ahead of it and not allowing it to get dry, if you know what I mean. So I think I did a pretty good job this year. You know, I started right into the monitoring of moisture levels in my systems right when the heat in the house started going on. Because I don't know about you, but in my house, when the heat's running, forced hot air dries the air out in the house considerably, and as a result my worm bins get kind of dry. And I didn't want to see that happening. You know, it makes for an uncomfortable environment for the worms, or at least parts of the environment is going to be uncomfortable for the worms, causing them to avoid those uncomfortable sections. And I'd really prefer that the worms just feel comfortable in every part of the bin, you know. I really like the idea of there being ample moisture everywhere for them. And for me, a lot of times just finding the worms out here on the very edges, like we're seeing now, is one of the good positive indicators, to me at least, that moisture's probably doing okay. I mean, it's fair to expect that when you put in a whole big assortment down into the feeding zone of frozen, you know, vegetables and fruits like this, as they thaw, they're going to dump out a whole bunch of their moisture into the system. And you know, I'm sorry, I just got a little distracted there because it does seem like we're getting lots and lots of worm action on this side of the bin. Yeah, you know, they must have just come in for that somewhat lightweight meal I gave them last time and just kind of polished it off and did away with it, because it almost does seem to me like the outskirts of the systems are even more popular than what the feeding zone appeared to be. At least here in bin 2. I don't know if I got that sort of feel when I was in bin number 1. But here in bin number 2, tell me if you think I'm imagining. But it did somehow seem like the outer edges of the system were really popular. Lots and lots of worms hanging out there. So, I think we're almost done. I'm just going to do my little top dressing of leafy matter. And this year I put away quite a bit of this stuff. Last year I think I went through one bag, and then towards the end of the season, shortly before the leaves started falling off the trees around here in central New Jersey, I found myself out of leaves. Really looking forward to the autumn, fall of the leaves, and as you can imagine, I was out there pretty quick right after they started falling to collect them. Some of these even have some of their colors. But I think we're almost done here. I think I'm going to use the cleaning off of my glove as yet another excuse to come back in here with more moisture, because once again, we put in dry stuff that I'd hate to see acting as a sponge, you know, sucking moisture out of the system versus being a complement to what's going on. It would sort of, it would be like dead weight, you know, and sucking up resources from other places. The moisture is here for the wormies. If the leafy matter is too dry, it should get moistened and made a little bit more friendly before we sign off. So, I don't know. My prepared bedding is prepared with moisture, so when I reach into that stuff to give them some of that, it feels damp. It doesn't feel to me like I'm putting something in that's going to cause dryness, but with the leafy matter that's stored dry. And I guess this might be one of my new habits, one of my hopefully good habits developing, which is to be more mindful of moisture in my systems. In the past, I used to get lots of feedback from the viewers, you know, sort of criticizing what they saw, you know, too wet, too dry, too this, too that. And believe it or not, I take all of that to heart, you know. I don't treat that as people being snobs or know-it-alls or anything like that. I actually do take every bit of criticism and constructive feedback as just that, as constructive feedback, and I try to use it to see if I can make things better and more cozy for the wormies. So let's get these little guys covered up and back to work, because we're done. Done taking care of their 7th feeding after 14 days, I do try to be careful to cover things up when I feel like any openings like this could result in excessive drying. I guess that's part of the reason I like the top coating of leaves too, because to me it almost does feel like it's sort of acting like a mulch layer to help keep the moisture down in the system. And look at this, perhaps this bag's even wider than this one. I thought they were the same, but this one seems to be struggling to go from edge to edge, and this one's got extra material to spare. Whatever, close enough, right? That's it for the video, everyone. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, as always, please don't forget to leave me a quick thumbs up before you go. That's always really appreciated. And if you haven't done so already, please also consider subscribing to the channel. That's very much appreciated as well. All right, everyone, thanks for watching. Have a great day. Bye now.